Hello, everybody. My name's Tom. This is David.
Hey, everybody.
We're here to talk about Loki, and then David's going to talk about Explore. And the reason we've grouped these together is because we launched them together, and we think they really kind of, are two sides of the same coin. So yeah, we're going to go straight into it. First, though, I'm going to be giving a demo at the end, and I would like to set it up. And just to show you that there's nothing beneath, up my sleeves, I want you to watch me set it up. So, if we, that's the backup demo, that's not the one I'm going to be deploying. Can everyone see that okay? If I do, I'm going to run this on Docker for desktop, so it's running on my Mac. Hopefully my battery will last. Let's have a look. kubectl get pods. So there's nothing there. Now we're going to just apply into the default namespace the TNS demo. So all the code for this is online. It's in GitHub Grafana TNS, so you can go and check it out. And I'm just going to run it so that it generates some metrics. Good. And then I'm going to deploy our default monitoring stack. And one of the other points of this demo is I'm going to use every possible deployment technology for Kubernetes. So I've used some YAMLs. I'm now going to use some Ksonnet. And at the end, I'm going to use some Helm. All right then. Ksonnet's nice and fast. There we go. Now if we do get pods, lovely. And there's a big lithium-ion battery in my case. If anything happens, you might have to run up and bring it out. Okay, good. Now back to the talk. So hopefully halfway through we'll have some data to actually play with. Yes, as I said, I should have put an intro slide for you here, David, really.
That's okay.
Do you have one on yours?
No, that's fine.
I can probably put one on really quick.
I can introduce myself.
Okay, so I'm Tom. I'm the VP product from Grafana Labs. I am actually one of the Prometheus maintainers. I also maintain a project called Cortex, which is another CNCF project. I've worked at a bunch of companies, as you can see. And I'm also one of the Loki authors, so I maintain that as well. I'm slowly going to capture them all. David.
I'm David. I'm director of UX, but mostly I just get coffee for Tom so he can type faster. Yeah, and
that's not fair.
I did a lot of work around Explore.
I mean, he did get me a coffee this morning, but he does more than that. So let's start with a bit of interaction from the audience, get you guys warmed up. Who here uses Kubernetes? What would you say? Is that about 20%? Keep your hands up. And then if you use Kubernetes and Prometheus, keep them up. Kubernetes and Prometheus. Not just Prometheus. I see some people who put their hands up, not for Kubernetes, but for Prometheus. And now, hands down. And now just Prometheus. Awesome, okay. Well, there's quite a lot of you who won't be familiar then with some of the stuff we're talking about. I'd say maybe, two-thirds of the audience might not know Prometheus, so I'll try and add a bit more color there. We're going to talk about Loki, though. And what is Loki? Well, Loki is a horizontally scalable, highly available, multi-tenant log aggregation system. We've got all three. Last time I gave this talk, somebody from the audience shouted, bingo, at that point. Anyway, we've tried to make Loki as close to the experience you get for metrics with Prometheus, but for logs. So I said, when we launched it at KubeCon in December, the tagline was like Prometheus, but for logs, and that has haunted me ever since. It's the worst tagline ever, but there we go. So we spent 12 hours on #1 on Hacker News, which was awesome. We've got over 5,000 GitHub stars. We've basically won at the internet now.
Yep.
And I think I can retire. No, okay. So we also started a design doc. We start every project with an in-depth design doc. I'm sure some of you in the audience have read it. The Google link's just there if you want to go and check it out. We like to do everything in the open at Grafana Labs, including how we design the projects. Before we even put code into the editor. And at the end, you'll see a design doc for the next phase, so keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm going to do 3 things in this talk. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes talking about these, and then we're going to hand over to David. I'm going to talk about how Loki is simple and cost-effective to operate. I'm going to talk about how we've integrated it with the existing observability stack, coming back to this kind of LGTM concept that we talked about this morning. And I've changed the third part since the last time I talked about this topic to cloud-native but airplane-friendly. Airplane-friendly. So let me just switch my screen so I can see my speaker notes. I do sometimes, put little prompts in to remind me what I'm supposed to say. There we go. So we're going to start with simple to scale. So if you're using existing systems to do some log aggregation, you're probably using something like Elastic, something like Splunk. A very common pattern for these systems is to do something called, to build something called an inverted index. This is where you take every line of logs and you split it up into tokens, and then you basically insert a tuple for every single one of those tokens. Now, I'm not actually an expert on this, so you can, if I'm getting this wrong, please let me know. But one of the nice things about this is by indexing all of the fields within a message or within a log line, it makes it really, really fast to do searches, right? And this is how Google indexes the internet. This is how Google does searches on the internet. So it's a really proven technology. But part of the motivation for Loki was that it's really hard to scale inverted indexes. Like if you look at how Google do it, they do a lot of pre-computation, they do a lot of batch processing in the back end to give you your inverted index that you can do quick queries on. But if you look at how other systems do it, they have to do it in real time. You expect it when your logs go in to be able to search them immediately. This is hard. Effectively, with an inverted index, your index is the size of the data you ingest. And we really wanted to change that with Loki. We wanted the index to be much smaller, so it's a much easier problem to solve. The other problem with inverted indexes is you end up either sending all of your writes to all of your nodes, or you end up sending all of your reads to all of your nodes in your cluster. And this is quite a well understood, obviously not by me, topic, but it makes them hard to scale for both like interactive read and write topics. And then the final problem is like the cardinality, like the number of entries for each item in the index is really high, because users can put whatever they want in. So we wanted to change this with Loki. We wanted to not index the contents of your logs, but still provide a system which was like easy to use and like useful in a kind of DevOps environment. So with Loki, we adopted this data model instead. We have a series of tags, like a bag of key value pairs for each stream within the database. The streams themselves are not indexed. This means our index, which we use for the tags, is much smaller. I mean, we're ingesting in our dev environment like 100 gig a week or something, so not a huge environment, but the index is like 100 meg, like it's 3 orders of magnitude smaller. This makes it super easy to scale out this system. It makes it super easy to operate. And generally, by using these tags and by getting these tags from the same place we do for our Prometheus metrics, it makes it really easy to switch between the two. So there's also some nice things about this. Because we group together into a single stream, like all of the data coming from, let's say, a single container on stood out. And because that's really similar, containers tend to be very noisy, they compress really well. So we group these together into these things called chunks, and then we compress these chunks, and we get excellent compression ratios. I actually should get some metrics for that, though. Is Gotham in the audience? He was at the back last time. He's here. What was the compression, Gotham? 8x. That doesn't sound very good. We'll have to do better.
We can always round it up to 10.
Yeah, we can round it up to 10, yeah. So that's what we've been trying to do with Loki. We've been trying to give you this experience that's much easier to scale, much easier to operate. So, integrating with existing tools. This is actually perhaps why I should have started with number 0. If you're on call, I don't think I'm actually on call right now, but I was last week, and I'm still doing on call, and most of the people on Grafana are actually on call. You'll be very familiar with this workload, with this workflow. This is the idea that you're going to get an alert. It's probably going to come to you through Slack or through PagerDuty or something. And then, that's going to be in the middle of the night. You're going to have no idea what's going on. And you're going to click on it, and it's going to take you to a dashboard. And this is a pre-prepared set of queries that kind of give you some idea of the behavior of the system. But because it's pre-prepared, this set of queries, this can't possibly ever imagine every single scenario and alert. The slides are already online if you want to check them out. You don't have to take photos. So generally, you're going to take a query from this dashboard, and you're going to kind of want to fiddle with it. You're going to want to look inside the query. You're going to want to change the way you break it down. You're going to want to focus on specific services. And so typically, what you had to do this is you go into the edit panel settings in Grafana, you copy the query out into your Prometheus editor, into the Prometheus query editor, and then you kind of fiddle with it, right? And then once you've narrowed down maybe to the host or to the service or to, I don't know, the thing that's showing some broken signs. Your metrics are only giving you an aggregate view, right? They're not telling you the exact error. They're just telling you maybe where the error is, how long it's been going on for, how severe it is, that kind of thing. So you then want to translate that query again into your log aggregation system. And you want to come along, and this example is Logly, I think. You want to come along and rewrite your query again, and then you'll get to the actual output from that container, a program or whatever, and it will say the actual, like, oh, well, there's too many connections, or the panic is at this point in the code. And then, obviously, for completeness, we put distributed tracing in there as well. If it's a performance issue, you normally use that kind of tool to narrow down exactly where it's coming from. But as you can see, we've had to use, like, 4 different systems. 5 different systems if you include Slack or PagerDuty. And at every step, you've had to manually translate between them. And preserving that context throughout this flow is really hard. So that was the problem we wanted to solve. Prometheus, for those who aren't familiar, has a relatively simple data model. This is where you have an identifier for a time series. A time series is just a list of tuples indexed by time. Timestamps are int64s, values are float64s. It's really, really simple, really uniform. And then the identifier is a little bit more sophisticated. They're, again, a bag of values. For those who have been paying attention, this should be familiar. In Prometheus, if you want to do a query, you generally specify a set of matches against these tags, against these labels. And that will select some set of time series that you'll then rate, aggregate, apply percentile maths to, do whatever you need to do to turn that raw data into the information you display in your dashboard. How does Prometheus do this? Where does it get its tags from? So again, with Loki, we've been mainly focused on Kubernetes, although all of this logic applies in other environments. So in Prometheus, the Prometheus server talks to the Kubernetes API server and asks it what services, what pods, what deployments, all of these kind of, what objects do you have in your object model? Then you apply a set of rules to those objects you return. These are called relabeling rules. I was going to put in a slide, what is relabeling, but I realized I forgot. It then munges these dictionaries that it returns into something that's useful, a set of targets. So these will be a set of dictionaries with some user-defined labels, maybe, and with an address of where to go and get the metrics. A good example of kind of the munging, the processing you might want to do in relabeling rules is in our Kubernetes cluster, we tend to deploy our dev environments and our staging environments in the same cluster as our production environments, just in different namespaces. When you do that, it's very common if you just include in the job name, like the name of the service, it's very common to accidentally aggregate together like your dev and your prod environment. Say we've got a console server running in dev and in prod, and I want to know the latency of console. It's very natural to type, blah, 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 latency of console, and you get the latency of dev and prod. And normally I only care about one or the other. So part of the munging that we do in our Prometheus server, part of the relabeling we do, is to put the namespace name into the job name. And this stops us from making that mistake. I like to think of this as we're encoding that kind of institutional knowledge of the mistakes we've previously made into code, into rules, so that new people don't make the same mistakes. So that's what relabeling is. In Loki, we do exactly the same thing. This just comes as no surprise. We use the data model for Loki is identical to the data model for Prometheus, except for we've changed the values, which were float64s, to bytes. That's it, the same thing. And then to gather these values, we use Prometheus. We use the Prometheus code base embedded into a job we call Promtail. It will go and talk to the Kubernetes API server, gather a list of targets, relabel them so they're consistent. You can literally apply the same relabeling rules in Promtail as you can in Prometheus. And then it will go and tail, hence the name of Promtail, it will go and follow the logs on disk for those targets and then attach the labels from those targets to those log lines and send them to Loki. And this enables, you saw it this morning with Torkel. Thanks, Torkel. You saw the side-by-side view with the consistent labels between the two, showing that you can really easily and quickly switch between metrics and logs for a given service. And so now, with the Explore view, thank you, David, and with Loki, we're halfway through this workflow and keeping it preserved within a single UI, within a single experience, and helping you automatically propagate that context. And that's really been the main motivation for Loki over the past year or so. So, final point, cloud native and airplane friendly. This is the one we talked about.
Yeah.
I was hesitant to include the word airplane friendly because I don't think anyone has a clue what I'm going on about, but David convinced me otherwise. The idea is I tend to travel around the world a lot. Grafana Labs, as Matt mentioned this morning, is a globally distributed company. So I tend to, I'm from London. I spent last week in New York with Raj and the team, and now we're in LA, and I have to spend a lot of time on planes, and I don't normally have the internet on planes. And so I really like to be able to code when I'm on planes. Nice headphones on, listen to some music, no interruptions, and get some coding done. But a lot of the kind of technologies I'm used to require an internet connection. I'm used to working with S3, AWS, Bigtable, Google, and so on. And I really wanted Loki to be the kind of thing I could develop on my laptop when I'm disconnected. And so that's what we did. We made Loki a single binary. It can run as a single process. You can store your logs on disk. You can, literally run it on a single laptop as a demo, as I'm about to show you. But of course, my laptop's got limited storage. Your single server in your data center's got limited storage. So we need to make it scale out. And so the same binary with the same technologies can scale out. You install it on multiple servers. You install Promtail on all the clients you want to scrape logs from. It'll collect those logs and send them to your Loki cluster. And it uses the technology we should all be familiar with, distributed hashing, Dynamo-style replication, to achieve this. And then it can use the local disks. But of course, Grafana Labs is a company, and we want to run a hosted version of Loki, so you don't have to operate it yourself. Even though we've made it super easy for you to operate, we want to run a hosted version that we operate and that we charge you to run. So and there's a particular style we use when developing these. We use a microservices architecture to do this. We really like to be able to scale out the read path separately from the write path. If we have a particularly heavy customer doing lots of reads, you know who I'm looking at, then we like to scale up the read path, and the write path can stay as it is. So for that, we have a really complicated architecture. We have the microservices architecture, where we've broken up every single one of the services into individual functions almost, where we've got a separate read path and a separate write path. We've got caching at every single layer. And then we don't like local storage when we run Grafana Cloud. We like to use cloud storage. That way we don't have to worry about its durability. We don't have to worry about the availability of the storage. So in Grafana Cloud, we use Bigtable and GCS to store the chunks. The Bigtable stores the index, and the chunks go in GCS. But again, this is all pluggable. So you can run this in Amazon, and you can use DynamoDB and S3 to store the chunks. There was a chap on the mailing list today who wanted to use Azure. I think they have a Cassandra compatible like Cosmos DB and another thing. And there was another chap on the mailing list who wanted to use Mini.io and Skylar DB. And we support all of that, to varying levels, varying degrees of success. So we've adopted all of the best practices for cloud native. We've made it containerized. We've made it Kubernetes native. We've used cloud storage. And we've made it so it can run at massive scale in the cloud. So that was my 3 points. That's the motivation behind Loki, without going into too many of the technical details. But that demo I started now, 20 minutes ago? I bet you're all wondering how that's getting on. So let's have a look at that demo. I'm going to have to mirror again. I swear Keynote used to automatically switch between mirrored and not. Anyway. So it's still running, that's good. Let's go and have a look. I want to show you that magic experience of switching between the two. I think this is not the right thing. 340. Yep, that's the right thing. So the demo, most demos people give 30/30? 330, I think. We're about to find out.
300.
Yes.
Yep.
So most demos people give, the actual application doesn't do anything. Normally it's just faking some errors. And I got kind of, we had one of them that I was going to use, but as I mentioned, I spent quite a lot of time on a plane recently. I spent the time making a Hacker News clone called Grafana News, and populating it with some stories, and making it so that you can actually see and interact with the demo. And you can see
I think you need to zoom in a bit.
Oh, I need to zoom in, sorry. Well, I don't really want them reading the titles.
No.
So, you can upvote things. We'll upvote all the stuff to do with Grafana Labs, because we like Grafana Labs. And you can see, it's interactive. You can really go to it. And, if you click on this, then you can see some star history of various projects and so on. But yeah, let's see what's going on in the back end. Oh, that spoiled that. Let's go back to here. Oh no, wrong cluster. Here we go. So we can look at Grafana, and we can go to the Explore view. And there's a local Prometheus running on my laptop. The demo is called TNS. Then we can go request durations. And this is kind of, I've skipped the dashboarding stage, because we all know about dashboards. But we can see how we can kind of fiddle with the demo. I probably don't need to see the last 6 hours, though. So let's just show the last 30 minutes. So here we go. The demo's been running. So I need to fix this by adding a rate, because I've done it wrong. OK, there you go. Now we can see the requests going in and out of this system. I'm going to maybe aggregate this, because we're seeing a lot of data. I only want to see, what do I want to see it by? Am I ruining your demo here?
No, not at all.
Good. So I want to see it by job for sure, and maybe status code as well. It's just showing some of the new features of the Explore view, where we get automatic tab completion for Prometheus, and it's pretty cool. OK, so we can now see there's definitely some errors going on. I'm interested in errors. OK. And I may be interested in just the ones coming from the DB. That's interesting. Obviously, this is a bit staged. Sorry if I'm faking it too much. Let's go and look at this period here. We can see there's some errors in there. And let's switch. Oh, I need to install Loki. Good point. So if you go into the Loki repo, let's just clear the screen. Then we can see we've shipped Loki with Helm charts, with case sonnet, with every different way of installing it you can possibly think of. I think there's even a shell script in there. The idea here is that we want to make it as easy as possible for you to run it and play with it. And now I've forgotten
it turns out Helm is surprisingly popular.
Yes, yeah.
We had to teach ourselves some Helm.
I've completely forgotten the command to run here. Sorry, wait a second. I don't use Helm. I'm a case sonnet guy. The command to run is this one. So Helm install Loki. Nope.
I think you need the...
Well, you can tell this is a real demo. There we go. Let's delete the old thing and create the new thing. OK, so hopefully Loki is installed. Get pod. Let's give it a second to create everything. Whilst it's doing that, we now go and add a data source to Grafana. So data sources, add a data source, Loki. And then, do I remember the magic? Loki 3100?
Yeah, that's the correct one.
I think you've done a bit more rehearsal than me, David.
Oh, there we go.
Good, so that worked. Now let's just mash this. So we're looking at some errors. I want to know what's going on. I know what job they're coming from. I know that errors are happening, and I know at what rate, and a nice sawtooth pattern. And if I switch to Loki, you'll see it preserves those, and nothing happened. Let's do that one more time. Let's maybe go in the last 5 minutes. Yes, there we go. I think I forgot to run Loki at the beginning of this. We can now see that you've switched to the logs for that service. David will go into a lot more details about how this all works, but you can see the actual error we're getting, which is fake, but it's query lock timeout. What's the, most of them are query lock. Some of them are too many open connections. Okay, that was the demo I wanted to give. So what's next? Loki's super early. We only launched it in December. It's still an alpha. We do encourage you to try it. We use it in production internally, and it's really proving to be quite useful. But right now, don't entrust it with too much. One of the things we're working on, actually one of the things David is working on, were you going to talk about this?
Not really.
No? Okay, good. I'll talk about it then. So we're going to add, we've started this experience, this Prometheus for logs experience, and we want to take it a lot further. So we're designing and building something called LogQL, a query language like PromQL, but for logs. If that's already trademarked, I'm sorry. These are just some examples of things we want to do. These are just random examples. We don't know what we're actually going to do. And when I said at the beginning I was going to give you another design doc, there's a link up here to the actual LogQL design doc. It's published, it's public. I'd love to hear your feedback. And after GrafanaCon, when I get back to London, this is what I'll be implementing. So now's a great time to get involved. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff we're going to be working on. There's some clustering and durability improvements. We want to make that, scale out story even better by incorporating gossip and so on. We really we've heard the feedback from everyone who's used the early versions of Loki, and we're going to add alerting to Loki so you can alert off your raw log streams. We're probably going to do that using LogQL. We want to make LogQL so you can combine Prometheus queries and log queries into a single metric and extract metrics out of your logs. And that's a great way of building alerts off of logs by extracting them out as metrics. That's one of the ideas, at least. One of the things we were talking about recently is about ability to get context. And we're on a super aggressive time schedule. We want to get all of these features done pretty much by the end of next month. Yep. I need to fly a lot more so I can spend 8 hours and implement them. And yeah, first beta in April, we hope, and then drive down the bugs and get it to GA as soon as possible after that. So we're going to do questions at the end, but thank you very much. And at this point, I'll hand over to David.
Cool.
Do I have to stand up or can I sit down?
You can sit down if you want.
You.
Yeah. Also, I was really excited about your airplane-friendly development mode, but then I was flying and they had Bohemian Rhapsody, and then I just watched that instead.
I was saving that for the way home.
So, hold on. Where do we go? So there's no slides on this one. Yeah, we're only doing basically inside of, we're only showing Grafana, basically. This is where in the workflow that Tom showed, where you basically, you get a notification in Slack, and then your, hold on, let me just refresh real quick, because I'm not so happy with the, with this white outline there. Yeah, that looks much better. Yeah, so basically on the workflow that Tom also showed earlier, where you get a page and maybe a Slack notification, you go to your dashboard and then you start figuring out what's going wrong. You usually end up at a dashboard with a panel like this. And then what do you do? Where do you go from there? And usually you went to the edit mode, and then here it's kind of unclear. If I start modifying here, will it affect my coworker's dashboard? Will I be able to share my modifications? And also there's just all this other stuff, like legend format, visualization options. Maybe the graph has a weird view. Then the template variables on the top left, they could have some values, but I just really want to be in a mode where I just don't see all this craft, basically. And what we built is something that basically does away with all this. And we call it Section Explorer. And where you see this is when you just jump to Explore. And then you have the metrics, the data source selector at the top, then a field for your queries, or multiple query rows, and then a graph. And also we just went for a line graph there, because you're going to look at a time series. So there's just 0 options on modifying what this all looks like. And the first really integrated experience for Explorer was around Prometheus. And since not so many people here were already using Prometheus, I'm curious now who's tried it and thought, oh, well, this prom killer stuff is really hard. Maybe I just give up. All right, there, OK. All right. Not as many as I hoped, but because we tried to ease people a bit more into Prometheus by giving them a couple of options here. So first of all, there's the Metrics Explorer here, which gives you a list of metrics grouped by their prefix. So for example, we ran the TNS demo earlier, so there's a TNS demo here, and then I only get the metrics that are related to this. And a really popular one, I guess, is the one about the request duration. And here I'm already getting the query helpers that Tom showed off earlier. And we implemented a couple of those. For example, if I went for a bucket, maybe also the TNS request duration, it's clear that a query returns time series that are bucketed to be converted to a histogram. And we detect this, and then we give you this query helper, for example, to basically turn the metric query into a fully fledged histogram quantile query. And then from here, the idea is that you can also just copy it and paste it again. And then, for example, this is how you would quickly get to your 95th percentile, but also your median. So sadly, the data isn't very exciting, but well. Anyway, so speaking of histograms, there's a whole list here in the front, histograms, because we think they're so useful that it's quite helpful to group them together in the beginning. So these are the query helpers. Also, I'm really curious. Oh, there's also history. I'm really curious to hear like more suggestions there on how people are struggling with PromQL, because like I've been doing this now for over a year, and I still have problems. But we try to make some more things easier here too. For example, a drill down, which Tom also showed, where you basically can select any kind of label down here, and then that gets added to the query as well. And this is how you can filter more and more. And he's already shown the split view. That's good. And then I'm really excited about what we call faceting, which is, for example, the demo app that we built. Or sometimes you haven't used this stuff in a while, and then all you remember is, or all you've seen is that the demo app is broken, and then you definitely remember the job usually, but you somehow don't remember what kind of metrics are available, and this is where this faceting logic really helps. So I can start with a selector, and I can narrow down more and more by using the name label, for example, to see which metrics are available for this job. And so there's some more TNS down here. So let's just use this one. OK. And then usually from here, I would jump over to Loki in this debugging workflow. So let's just do this real quick. And then I would get the logs from the default app. And so let me just quickly go through some features here. We got a similar setup again, where we have a log label explorer, which basically gives you the whole log label space on the labels that Loki has seen. But we're just happy with this right now. And then you can do some filtering here already in the chart. So for example, now I only want to see arrows. And earlier, I've already seen that there was like some lines that had a misspelled failed word. So I was quite happy for this. Yeah, because this will help me to show off.
Oh, that yeah, show off my spelling mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. No, but this is going to help me show off that we have just proper regular expression matching there. So now it's going to return failed and failed. So that's going to work. OK. And then what we also built on top of this is basically line-based parsing, but inside the browser. Because the whole idea of Loki is that whatever is in the log message won't be dissected on the back end to keep the storage as small as possible. But we allow about 1,000 lines, here's the limit, to be returned into the browser. So you can use Control F really quickly to also look through the results. And there's no paging, right? I always, on existing logging products, I was totally annoyed that I could only see 50 results at a time, and I had to click next. And then this was always just getting in my way. And what we do here now is these 1,000 lines will give you a hopefully big enough data set to do some ad hoc analysis. For example, if I want to just see what the distribution is between those messages, I can see that the one with the typo is a bit more prevalent. And so we built two parsers for these. The first one is for log format. So log formatted, like in Golang. Those log messages, they can be parsed in the browser, and the other one is JSON. And if you come find me afterwards and you have your favorite logging format, then yeah, maybe just tell me and we can implement the next one, because it's also supposed to be quite pluggable. And let's see what else we got. Deduplication, yep. that's always a good feature. And here we already see that there's different algorithms. The first one just does exact line content matching. The second one strips all the numbers, which is quite helpful if you have IPs in there. And then it's already clear, right? The first line is represented 8 times. And then if they're very similar, you can use the signature. And that just strips out everything except punctuation. And yeah, so let's just get back to Loki. And the future for us at this point would be to have an integration with Jaeger as well, right? So the future should somehow look like this. You should be able to switch over to a Jaeger data source. A similar label mechanism should apply, and then you would have traces already pre-filtered by some sort of label mechanism that you can consume them. And then this will all be fully integrated into the metrics, logs, traces experience. But yeah, so speaking of the future, we have Loki coming up. I'm on the team working on this. It's not. We're going to make it public soon, and we're going to put out a message in the public Slack channel. And context is coming up, where basically if you have line search matches and you just want to see what came before, like the 10 lines before, which is something that people really like to do just using grep, like grep-c. We want to support this within the Loki Explore UI as well. And I think that's what I'm going to be working on the next couple of weeks. And I think that's all I have.
Cool. I just seen Raj is wandering off. And he's now running.
Oh, he's running.
This is great.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we're going to have some questions.
Cool. Thank you, David.
I'm sitting here.
At this point, we just chill out and wait for Raj to bring the chair up.
Sorry, guys. That's fine.
All right, we have lots of questions. So first one, I think it's quite an obvious question that I've seen a lot of people ask around Loki, is, and this comes from Gaurav, and he's excited about the Loki UI, it seems, Explore, and he's asking, will it work with things like Elasticsearch or Splunk?
Yes. So there are plans to make the logging UI that I've shown a bit more abstract, so that we can also accommodate Elastic fields and Elastic indices, and the mechanism that Elastic also provides. For example, Elastic already returns to you the graph that you saw above as part of the response, and whereas for Loki we have to kind of calculate this on the fly. So there are the things, the elements that you need visually, they're already there. We just need to sit down and hammer this out, basically. Yeah. So similarly for Splunk, although I'm not sure how well that's going to fit yet.
Okay. So the answer is it's coming. We're figuring it out.
The answer is it's coming.
Awesome. Cool. Another question from Gene, I believe from Puppet. How does Prometheus and the relabeling apply outside of Kubernetes?
Yeah, it's a good question. You can use Prometheus outside of Kubernetes. Like, it's very common to use it inside of Kubernetes. I would probably argue that almost every Kubernetes cluster has a Prometheus in. But actually, it came from a world before Kubernetes. Like, the Kubernetes service discovery in Prometheus was added relatively late on in the pre 1.0, but still relatively late. I remember we were using Prometheus before it had Kubernetes service discovery, and we were using DNS to find targets. And just like that, you can integrate it with console. There's even a static config file you can configure static targets in. So everything I've talked about with Prometheus and relabeling still applies for DNS, for console. I mean, there's a list on the Prometheus website of all the different service discovery integrations. There's an external mechanism for building your own service discovery implementations. And so if you've got your own favorite system, I think we've got Zookeeper in there as well. I can't remember them all.
Yeah.
But if you're running it in a data center, this is something we care a lot about and we really want to make work. even better. So it's still, Promtail can still work. If you have an existing, this is probably going to answer another question that's already there, but if you have an existing like Fluentd deployment, we've published a Fluentd plugin for Loki as well, so you can have Fluentd send your logs. Obviously, you don't get Prometheus relabeling, and depending on your point of view, that might even be a good thing. And we're super interested. I think the latest one people have been asking for is beats, and so I see no reason why we shouldn't make beats talk to Loki as well.
Cool. Question from Brad Fino. I guess this is one of my favorite questions. So is Loki attempting to be a replacement for something like Elk or complementary to?
That's a good question. I think depends what you use Elk for. I know a lot of people use it for log aggregation, like for taking the std and std out of your containers or your application and indexing that. And yes, in that situation, Loki is intended to be a replacement.
Let's just do a quick show of hands. Sorry to interrupt you, Tom. How many of you guys are using Elastic in the conference? And how many are using Elastic with Grafana? Keep your hands up. OK. Cool. Sorry, keep going.
Cool. No, interesting. And a second use case for Elastic, and again, like I admitted at the beginning of my talk, I'm really not an Elastic expert, but a second use case is really for doing kind of more involved analytics. So if you want to know like the unique number of visitors that came from a particular country to a particular service, like Elastic's a great solution for that. It's good at the high cardinality problem, something that Loki won't be good at, right? And you won't really be able to ask those kind of BI and analytics questions with Loki, at least not in our current plans. So yeah, if you're using Elastic for analytics and for BI, you're still going to use Elastic for analytics and BI. Loki is not for you. But what we really hope is with Loki, you can take a lot of the load off of your Loki cluster, sorry, your Elastic cluster, and put like the raw like pod logs, application logs, that really are huge volume that your developers just want to be really noisy with and put as much info as possible. You can put those into Loki and take a lot of the kind of hard work off of Elastic and have it just focus on the things it's really good at.
Cool. Another question, and this is more, I think, for you, David, around the Explore. So we saw in the various demos how you can start with the Explore view and do an ad hoc query. The question is, once you're in the Explore view, is there an option to then save the graphs that you've generated back in a dashboard?
So that's a concept we have basically thought about also from the beginning. It's just the other stuff around Explore was just more important. The experience around helping formulate Prometheus queries, the split view was really well received, and so saving something back to dashboards just got a bit pushed down to the queue, but
maybe because we do conference-driven development and the deadline for 6.0 was today.
It's
right.
So when are we going to have that then, David?
I defer this to the ever-growing Grafana team, so right. I think we get some help there now.
Right. So it sounds like it's definitely something we want to do, and it's probably something in 6x.
You've got a long flight home coming, haven't you?
Well, maybe there's another Oscar-winning movie I could watch.
Okay, and question from Bartek, and this is kind of funny. I don't know if it's a question so much as an explanation. Wait, will we have tracing in Grafana? Question mark.
So no, this was only for demo purposes to kind of show where the future is going, because we want to allow this experience to have metrics, logs, and traces in the same product, and then also having those side by side and maintaining, most importantly, the context between those. So that's definitely where we're going. Luckily, Uber is working with us on this. They are very keen to not ship their own, having to ship their own UI separately. They really want to integrate with us, so I'm looking forward to working with Yuri on this.
Cool. That sounds excellent. Also, another question about Explore. What happens if you try to use Explore from a dashboard that has template variables?
So the template variables, they get interpolated once you leave Explore, which is just due to the fact that by the time you've looked at something, you've identified something, you've already made a selection for the template variables, and at that point, if you want to iterate through the queries and you jump over, everything's already expanded. And then if you still want to modify the queries, we give you other tools like tab completion for this.
Sure. Another question.
That, by the way, is
ahead,
like,
Tom.
I think, the coolest thing about Explore, by the way, David.
Oh, thanks.
Like, because in that experience where I was copying and pasting the query out of the panel and into Prometheus, like, I'd have to manually go and, like, edit my template variables. And it was really annoying.
Happy to help.
So, like, having that seamlessly work is, like, huge for me.
Right. So the answer is it kind of just works with templating variables. So the Explore view, will it be supported by custom plugins?
Yes. So there's an API which isn't quite well documented because we just did a lot of work on it in the last month. But every data source can implement their own Explore experience by following the API, basically. And the idea there is that we want to give various data sources a custom way around kind of the problems that they're also solving, because maybe not everything is similar to Prometheus, not everything is similar to Loki. So we want to, just also deliver on the broader Explore promise.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, a little bit of a technical question. I know, Tom, you kind of mentioned up front that you're not super familiar with the innards of Elasticsearch, but so Splunk and Elk have several data structures for storing data, not just inverted indices. These are optimized for full text search. For instance, structures like columnar stores in Lucene. How does Loki compare to these?
So the Lucene columnar store is actually very similar to how we index the label fields within Loki. You can actually also, like, you could consider, and maybe this is a bit out there, you can consider, like, the way Prometheus stores data to be columnar. Like, the whole trick with columnar storage is to put very similar data in the same blob so it compresses well. Like, that's where it gets all its benefits from. You split, if you've got a traditional SQL table, you would split them up by columns, and given that the column has the same type and the data is expected to be very similar, the expectation is it compresses very well. The other idea with columnar stores is that they only, you only fetch the columns you want to query on. So if you were to take those ideas and apply them to time series, like, you could imagine all the metrics coming from a single host at a single point in time is a row, and the different metrics are columns in that row. And you can see how actually in a kind of Prometheus world, because things are stored by time series, not by host, it is effectively a columnar store. Like, this maybe isn't a particularly common opinion, but in this, we've used basically the same architecture for Loki. So logs from the same service, from the same job, from the same process are going to go into a single file and get compressed together, and therefore get some of those benefits. But of course, because we're not breaking down the individual log lines by field, you're not going to get all the benefits of a columnar store with Loki. Like, the compression is pretty good, but you can expect, if you're just storing ints, if you're just storing loads and loads of int64s, you can effectively compress each one, for reasonable distributions down to like a byte. Like, and that's 16x compression. It's incredibly good. You won't get that kind of thing with Loki, but it should still be very good. Do you think that answers the question?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. We've got a couple more questions. Is there any log message size limit by design? How are jumbo log entries handled?
We're going to have to implement a log limit. We haven't implemented one yet.
Is that one of the many reasons why it's an alpha?
Yeah, that would be one of the things that before beta we'd have to do.
Yep.
We've put limits on the cardinality of labels, on the size of labels, the number of labels you can have. And generally, like, one of the things we're very focused on, not only because we're running Loki as a service, open to the public, but because we also want it to be, like, super reliable for our users as well, is imposing these reasonable restrictions. We actually have a really cool technique inside Cortex, which Loki is based on, for applying different limits to different users, because it's a multi-tenant system, so you can actually, there's a YAML file on disk that's reloaded every few minutes, where you can specify, oh no, but for this user, we'll allow him a little bit higher cardinality, or we'll allow them to have, for this particular label, we'll allow them to have more, longer length. We need to apply the same techniques to log lines. We're, something we're working on, definitely going to do. Jumbo log lines are a different topic. We'll leave that for another day.
Okay. Speaking of leaving that for another day, I guess this is the second to last question, which will be a good question to maybe be the second to last question, maybe the last one, is will you be taking further questions on Loki, because I have lots of them, and are you guys coming to the Grafana 6 after party?
Are we going to the after party?
I think we're there.
I heard there's a really good music scene in LA. I really want to check out some music, but maybe we'll do that Tuesday.
All right. So the answer to that question.
Are we taking more questions? I believe there's a office hours tomorrow.
That's right.
Do you know when it is?
I do not. I'll have to
No,
check
me
the
neither.
schedule. I'll have to check with the organizers.
Yeah, we'll ask
also-
Trent when the office hours are.
There's also a Loki channel on a public Slack,
Oh, yeah.
which I'm usually fielding questions there.
Yeah.
And an email list as well if you've got questions like, and I'll be wandering around.
Yeah. And as Tom said, this is all done out in the open. So if you want to, follow along with anything that we're doing, you're
Yeah,
more
we
than
hope
welcome.
that link for the query language, I actually forgot to tell you, David, I've made it public now.
What?
So get in there.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Personally speaking, I'm super excited about Loki. Please give a hand to Tom and David for pulling it together.